It started with something so ordinary that I almost ignored it. My name is Daniel, and 6 months ago I moved into a rundown apartment building because it was the only place I could afford. The building was old, quiet, and always smelled faintly of damp concrete and cigarette smoke. The walls were thin enough that you could hear televisions through them, but strangely, I almost never heard voices. The landlord handed me my keys on the first day and said only one thing before leaving. Most people keep to themselves here. At the time, I thought he was just describing apartment life. I had no idea what he really meant. My apartment was on the 4th floor. Right across the hallway was apartment 408. The first thing I noticed was that someone clearly lived there. Packages appeared outside the door almost every day. Groceries were delivered every Tuesday. Sometimes bags of takeout sat outside for only a few seconds before disappearing. Yet, I never saw anyone open the door. Not once. At first, I assumed our schedules simply never crossed. I worked remotely, often late into the night, and slept in the mornings. Maybe my neighbor worked different hours. But weeks passed. Every time I walked through that hallway, apartment 408 remained silent. No footsteps, no conversations, no television, nothing. Then I noticed something even stranger. The doormat outside the apartment never moved. Rainy days, dusty days, even after deliveries, it looked untouched. One evening, while bringing groceries upstairs, I ran into Mrs. Alvarez from apartment 402. She was probably in her 70s and seemed to know everyone in the building. As we waited for the elevator, I casually asked, "Do you know the person living across from me?" Her smile disappeared immediately. "You mean 408? "Yeah." She stared at the elevator doors for a long moment before answering. "I wouldn't worry about him." "Him?" She nodded. "He hasn't left that apartment in years." I laughed. "Seriously?" "I'm serious." Before I could ask another question, the elevator arrived. She stepped inside without another word. That conversation stayed in my head all week. Years? That wasn't possible. People had to shop, work, go outside. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. Late one afternoon, I waited near my peephole after hearing another food delivery arrive. A young delivery driver placed a paper bag outside apartment 408. He knocked twice, then walked away. I kept watching. 10 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute. Nothing. Just as I started feeling ridiculous. The bag slid backward, not lifted, not picked up. It simply slid across the floor beneath the door. No hand appeared, no shadow, nothing. I opened my own door immediately. The hallway was empty. Apartment 408 was silent again. I walked over and crouched near the bottom of the door. There was barely enough space underneath for a sheet of paper, certainly not an entire bag of food. Yet, the bag was gone. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe there was a larger gap than I realized. Maybe someone opened the door so quietly I missed it. Maybe I was overthinking everything. That night, around 2 a.m., I woke to a strange sound. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It wasn't loud. It sounded slow, like someone dragging their fingernails across wood. I sat up in bed. The scratching continued. It seemed to come from the hallway, specifically apartment 408. I opened my bedroom door carefully. The apartment was completely dark. The scratching stopped. I waited. Silence. After a minute, I convinced myself it had probably been pipes expanding or an old branch scraping the building. The next morning, I found 4 long scratches carved into the hallway floor, directly in front of apartment 408. They hadn't been there before. Days passed. The scratching became a nightly occurrence. Always after 2 a.m. Always lasting a few minutes. Always stopping the instant I got close to my front door. Eventually, I mentioned it to the landlord. He sighed. I was wondering when you'd ask. So you hear it too? I hear plenty of things. He refused to explain further. Instead, he simply handed me a spare smoke detector battery I'd requested and said, "If you hear knocking from inside your walls, ignore it." I laughed awkwardly. He didn't. That night I barely slept. At exactly 2:13 a.m., the scratching returned. Then, a voice, very soft, almost impossible to hear. "Help me." I froze. It came from apartment 408. "Please." The voice sounded weak, like someone dehydrated. I grabbed my phone. I almost called the police, but before I could dial, another voice answered. This one was deeper, calm, cold. "No." Silence. Then the scratching started again. The next morning, I called building management. They assured me someone legally occupied apartment 408. Rent was always paid on time. There were no complaints. Case closed. Except that afternoon, curiosity overwhelmed common sense. I walked over, knocked once, nothing. Twice, nothing. Then, 3 knocks came back. Not on the door, from inside the wall beside me. I stepped backward so quickly I nearly fell. The hallway was empty, no footsteps, no movement, only silence. A week later, the power went out during a thunderstorm. The emergency lights barely illuminated the hallway. Everyone stepped outside their apartments. Everyone, except apartment 408. As neighbors gathered near the stairwell, I quietly asked Mrs. Alvarez, "Has anyone ever actually seen him?" She looked pale. "There used to be a man." "Used to?" "He stopped answering his door years ago." "So why doesn't anyone check?" "We did." "What happened?" She looked down. "The police opened the apartment." I blinked. "What?" It was empty. My stomach tightened. "Then who lives there now?" She whispered so quietly I almost missed it. "No one." Before I could respond, the hallway lights flickered back on. Mrs. Alvarez hurried inside and locked her door. I stood alone, looking directly at apartment 408. Something inside knocked once, slowly, as if it knew I was there. The next evening, I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. I searched old newspaper archives online. Eventually, I found a short article from 8 years earlier. A resident named Thomas Weaver had vanished from apartment 408. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of leaving, no body, no suspects, just gone. The apartment had reportedly been searched from top to bottom. It was completely empty. Then why were groceries still disappearing? Who was paying rent? Who was making those sounds every night? I decided I needed proof. At midnight, I taped my phone outside my apartment door with the camera facing apartment 408. I let it record overnight. The next morning, the video was normal. Hours of empty hallway, nothing happened. Until 2:13 a.m. The camera suddenly filled with static. Not digital glitches, actual television like snow. It lasted exactly 30 seconds. When the picture returned, the hallway looked different. Older. The wallpaper was faded. The lights were yellow instead of white. Standing outside apartment 408 was a man. He looked terrified. He pounded on the door, begging someone inside to let him out. Not an out. Then the door slowly opened. Only darkness waited beyond it. The man stepped backward. Something unseen grabbed him. He disappeared inside. The door closed. The hallway returned to normal. My recording ended. I watched the footage over and over. The timestamp never changed. It still read 2:13 a.m. I ran across the hall. For the first time, the door to apartment 408 wasn't locked. It slowly creaked open. Inside, there was almost nothing. No furniture, no kitchen table, no television. Just a single chair facing the back wall. The apartment smelled damp, old, like it had been sealed for decades. Then I heard breathing. Not mine, someone else's. Slow, heavy, coming from the bedroom. Every instinct told me to leave. Instead, I took one step forward, then another. The bedroom door stood slightly open. Inside, moonlight spilled across the floor. The room appeared empty, until I looked at the closet. The closet door was open just enough to reveal darkness inside. Too dark. Darker than the room itself. I raised my phone's flashlight. The beam stopped at the opening. It didn't shine inside, it simply ended. Then I heard the voice again. Soft, weak. Don't look. Before I could react, something knocked from inside the closet. 3 slow knocks. The same 3 I'd heard through the wall. Another whisper drifted out. It notices when you look. My flashlight flickered. The darkness inside the closet seemed to move. Not like a person. Not like an animal. Like a shadow unfolding itself. I stumbled backward. The apartment door slammed shut behind me. Every light went out. The hallway disappeared. The only thing I could hear was breathing. Right beside my ear. I don't remember how I escaped. The next thing I knew, I was outside the building at sunrise. The police searched apartment 408 later that morning. Again. They found it completely empty. No chair, no closet, no signs anyone had entered for years. I moved out the same day. I tried to forget everything. Months later, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a USB drive. It contained exactly 1 video. Security footage from my old apartment hallway. The timestamp read 2:13 a.m. The hallway was empty, except for one thing. My apartment door slowly opened. I stepped out, walked across the hall, opened apartment 408, and smiled. The camera watched me enter. The door closed behind me. The hallway stayed empty for the rest of the recording. I never made that video. At least, I don't remember making it. But sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I hear 3 slow knocks coming from somewhere inside my walls. And for a split second, I wonder if I ever really left apartment 408 at all. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, subscribe for more horror stories. And remember, sometimes the quietest neighbors are the ones you should fear the most.